Welcome to this special AI edition of Talk Commerce that I have Paul Byrne. He is the author of
Great to meet you.
AI Adapt or Die. Paul, go ahead. Go ahead and do an introduction for yourself. Tell us your day-to-day role and outside of writing your book.
Right.
And one of your passions.
Yeah. So I am the president of Rizoyo. We are a long-time development firm. We started in the e-commerce space, which is where we met, Brent, and partnered on some Magento things. Your company really kind of wrote some fantastic extensions for Magento. So we sold quite a few of those to our clients. And day to day, I mostly focus on, kind of what an executive might focus on, making sure that the business is improving itself, handling any specific issues that might be, require extra resources or something along those lines. And just, the admin role of overseeing finance, accounting, marketing, all that sort of stuff. But I do spend a fair amount of time talking to our clients, and that's sort of what led me to write the book. I saw that there was a lot of kind of concern about where AI is going, and everything kind of seems up at the air. And I know a lot of development companies, including Rizoyo, saw a lot of clients kind of sitting on the sidelines, wondering if the projects they're working on or what they were doing was going to be sort of overshadowed by AI or sort of engulfed in it. And would they get any return on investment for writing stuff? And which is a legit question, because that's definitely the case. Like you have to be able to pick and choose and know what's going on. So I spent a lot of time researching, what AI is and the history of it and kind of where it's going and what the limitations are. Writing the book was made, just to kind of help people make better decisions who are either founders or maybe the product owners or, of a smaller company that doesn't have a bunch of people on staff that are AI experts. And so just, providing people some guidance in that area was my main goal.
Yeah, good. All right. So, but before we talk about the book, we have to do the free joke project. I'm going to tell you a joke.
All right. I'm on joke welfare here.
There you go. Yeah. You give me a rating 8 through 13. So here we go. There are two types of people in the world: those who can't relax when there are dishes in the sink, and those who don't even notice them, and they end up marrying each other.
So that one rings a little true. I'm going to say that's a 12. I'll give that one a 12.
I picked that one because that is my life. Yeah, absolutely. I'll let people out there guess whether I'm the dishwasher or I'm the sink not looking or.
Yeah. If my wife's watching this, she knows exactly which one I am.
Okay, good. All right. Well, so, this is such a great topic. There's still so much pushback on using AI and even what AI can be used for. And I literally had a call an hour ago on that very subject on, what do you use for workflows? So kind of give us a premise of the book and how, and the 10,000 foot view to start.
Yeah, I think as I was writing the book, which was a follow-up really, and sort of intellectually and research wise to several sessions that I taught at the University of North Texas, where I was teaching the students in digital commerce. So the e-commerce majors. And I had done some research at that point, trying to figure out, what was going on with AI, et cetera. And I did some follow-up research. And one of the key insights as I tried to distill this down to make it useful was the difference between type 1 and type 2 learning and where we are in that development process. And so one of the early chapters in the book introduces that concept. And the basic concept is type 1 learning is more like reactive. So you already know the answer. It's a multiple choice question on a test, something, or a math problem that you already know how to solve. And you just you don't really have to think about it. You just go into solve mode, you go into answer mode. And that's type 1 learning. You think about it as like a glorified Google search. The second, type 2, has some very specific requirements, and it's more like reflective thinking. And so it's the type of answer where you have to consider the question, think about it. You haven't encountered this in the past in the way it is now. There's no way you could answer it from memory or anything like that. And so the type 2 learning is more along those lines. And that's like kind of considering human terms, right? In machine terms, it's a little bit different. But we know what the LLMs and the machine learning does right now is it just kind of predicts answers, right? It's not really trying to get the right answer. It's trying to get the one that's most likely to be kind of acceptable based on what it's been trained on. And it's highly dependent on the data set that it's been trained on, which now is the entire text of the internet. And so that kind of learning is what I would call really a glorified search, Google search. Like, even though it seems like it's talking to you and it seems like it's playing, it's not really playing. The type 2 learning and type 2 thinking in AI is going to be then, well, it has to have a plan, it has to have persistent memory, it has to have, be essentially goal seeking. And there are a couple of other, requirements in there. But I think it gives you, a good idea of, just going over that, what the type 2 learning is and or type 2 thinking is from an AI perspective. And we're just not there yet. I think, I follow a gentleman named Yann Lequin, who is a French researcher. He used to be the head of Meta's artificial intelligence unit, or whatever they call the business unit. And he's now left there to run his own shop. And so maybe he's getting close. He's the guy that kind of is, I would say, sort of the most direct in his assessment of how we're getting there. And in his point of view, you would say that the LLMs that we have are kind of an off ramp from AI research. And they're a good off ramp, right? Like, there's so much that we can do with them. And I think we're just kind of scratching the surface of the current models and the type of machine learning we have now, but it is going to be limited. So, in my book, I try to explain how to understand what those limitations are so that you can evaluate, oh, is this project I'm working on, likely to be become part of an LLM in the future. And I think a lot of the early, projects in that space, including e-commerce, have sort of figured out, oh, like, I just wasted a bunch of money on a project because now it's just incorporated in LLMs. But that's really kind of, what the book explains. It takes longer than 20 minutes. But it's, you could probably read the book in a few hours.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's a couple of things to dig into there. I think maybe even people knowing what to use AI for. Are we going into that? Or, like, there's so many use cases, and the typical use case is creating social media posts.
Yeah.
But that is like such a side project of what people should be using it for. I think Claude Code is probably the biggest thing that
we use
going
that
to stick around. Yeah.
So and Claude Code, and there's another one, I can't remember its name right now, but these CLI tools for developers that are agents that can produce sub agents that can, kind of work together. Those are, those have made AI tools useful for developers. And in fact, we just recorded a podcast earlier today with our CTO and one of my product managers. And, he went over kind of how developers use Claude Code and what it can and can't do, and sort of what we expect from it. But yeah, you hit it on the nose. Like, Claude Code is big. Like, that definitely changes things. It doesn't mean I can replace 10 developers with Claude Code, but it does mean that my senior developers and my leaders can move more quickly, especially in code review. Code review is, checking for security and performance, et cetera. It's able to do that stuff that's kind of tedium really quickly. And in fact, that's what LLMs are really good at, like the tedium, right? Taking away the tedium.
Yeah, they're good at the tedium, but they're also good at the confusion. And I was just thinking about this in my workout this morning. On, I built a little Claude Code workspace where I have a sprint, and I start my sprints, and it creates, all my documents. And this morning I do a retrospect every other Friday, and I went and looked at it. It's created a ton of documents that mean nothing, that are all over the place, and there's duplicates, and like, it is just. And I have an MCP memory running, and I write a contextual file as I'm going along, so it keeps I can continue across context. But man, it's like, and I think about this in my head, like, it is thinking in its own way, and we need to think in our way. And I almost feel
Yeah.
like we need to have a way to like have a skill that's a human skill that
Yeah.
says humans aren't going to think with 10,000 random files in a folder. We need the folders that are in a structure so we can understand what's there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So another AI educator, you're probably familiar with Andrei Karpathy. He was in the news when the whole OpenAI thing blew up a few years ago, and Sam Altman was there and he wasn't there and came back and everything. But Andrei Karpathy left just shortly after that. He was one of the founders of OpenAI. And in my mind, one of the best educators about it, about, what AI does and can do, and especially, the type 1 thinking models that we have. But his point of view and the way that we've kind of started designing our software is there needs to be like this human slider. So AI becomes more and more capable in certain ways and in certain things. And so you have to know when to insert the human into the loop within a program. You know, we've kind of done that. We start replacing things that humans used to do with a little bit of AI, right? And then you start doing more and more of that. And so we've actually started kind of designing our software around this idea that there's this slider and it's going to keep going up, at least for now, because there
Yeah,
are a lot of headwinds for AI.
yeah. I mean, going back to the idea of humans in the loop, and even writing content, it's great. AI can create all your content. It could write your book probably now, but is it going to
Not
write it
really.
in a way that anybody wants to read? That's the biggest problem. And especially in software, it's going to do it, but is it really going to do it the way anybody wants to see it? Like there's so many variables that have to have a human in the loop there.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about
for sure.
how you've been able to bridge some of that and what you talk about specifically in your book around humans in the loop.
Yeah. So it's a question of, an example I could use is like the AI chatbot, right? At first, it seems really cool. You go to a website and, oh, there's this chatbot, and you don't have to wait for a human to show up. You don't have to wait until they're not answering 20 other chats, to get back to you. Like you can get really useful information, and, and often it's good enough for a lot of inquiries. But then you get to things that it can't answer for you or that are clearly exceptions. And then it just starts spitting out garbage, right? And so what you have to do is you have to design your bot so that the bot realizes, or your monitor of that bot realizes, when this is something that is an exception and is going to require a human, and then transfer the chat over to the human. So we're in the middle of, in the next few months, we're actually launching a new uh, a new messaging service for customer service for B2B e-commerce. It's specifically designed for that because there's tons of interaction that really just needs to be handled by a human. And it was built on the idea of kind of empowering the human, like using AI to bring context in while you're talking to somebody, and so that the human doesn't have to have 50 tabs open and be researching stuff and googling. Like that can all happen in the background. So that's one way of kind of adjusting that slider. The other thing is in the way that we write code and the way that we do code review. And uh this morning, as I was speaking to William, our CTO, we were talking about how he's incorporated it into code review, and he's built these various agents using Claude Code that go through and check for all of the common things. And so before one of the developers submits something for human code review, it has to go through AI code review. And the way he set up the agents is, they provide him with a specific report and information on it, and then he knows how to to go in and look. And he said, yeah, sometimes it gets it wrong, there's some false positives, etc., but for the most part it really enables him to do more in-depth code review. And so it improves the quality of our software. And that's kind of one of my predictions in the book as well, is that we're going to see a lot of improvement in quality. That there's like the AI slop, and then which is asking the AI to actually generate something and create something. And then there's the AI code review, or the AI quality improvement on the other side, where the humans overseeing everything, but the AI enables that human to work more quickly and to do more.
Yeah, I'll make two comments because I'm a big Claude Code user, and
Yeah.
I've created a Claude comms skill where if you have two windows open and they suddenly need to talk to each other, you can either copy and paste,
Mm-hmm.
or I created a common file in my Claude folder that they write to and then they talk
Yeah.
to each other, which has really sped up my work. And I actually have them name
Mhm.
themselves as well. The only downside is I get a lot of Claude Beethovens for some reason. Like I just looked and I had like 4 Claude Beethovens. I don't know why they obviously I need a rule that says don't create the same name, but
Yeah, that's funny.
um but so that one, and the other part of this is it's the democratization of doing a lot of things that people couldn't do. And let's talk
Yeah.
about coding, because everybody can be a coder now, right? Part of that is that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't. They don't. In fact, I was on a recent podcast of fires founders firing on all cylinders, and I was talking to Christian Hamilton of Acoustic Orange, and he's not technical at all, right? He doesn't write code, and he got into vibe coding and using the tools. And I think he had the experience that most people do that don't, understand how to develop software, and that is he would get to a point where then he would just ask it to change the title on the page, and it would nuke his entire repo, right? And
Right.
start over.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Oh my God.
so
Yes.
the tools are getting better. I'm looking forward to a conversation with a gentleman that I was on a kind of on a panel discussion yesterday, who's also not technical, and he's taught himself not to use Claude Code but to use Cursor in a very limited way, and he's got this specific project that he wants to do, and he's going to record the whole process, and that's
Okay.
going to be fun. I'm going to recommend that video when it comes out, because first of all, this guy's pretty interesting, and kind of a transversal thinker, but also I haven't really recorded anything like that, but I'm guessing there'll be a lot of foul language
Yeah.
involved.
I have a weekly newsletter called Tuesdays with Claude.
Yeah,
And I have a number of well, I have at least one where I have a lot of emotion in it.
yeah,
And then I have another one. I do have one where I asked Claude to go ahead and clean up some of my files in a folder.
yeah.
And it ended up deleting about 1,000 files from my system for absolutely no reason. I mean, thank goodness I had a repo, and I have a remote repo. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was just, I'm like, what? And I started going and restoring, and I'm like, wait, no, let's just do a hard
yeah,
reset. This is
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
I also have a violations log that I keep running
yeah.
at
So
all times.
So my point of view is that the won't really be good at software engineering and creative software development and design until there are breakthroughs in type 2 thinking. And right now, but the other thing that I think a lot of people expected, and one of the reasons, oh, well, we're going to like the CEO of Anthropic at Davos makes the comment that software engineering is going to be automated away in 12 months. And I'm like, I don't know if you're just breathing your own exhaust or what's going on there, but it's clearly not happening, and they're not going to get there. In fact, if anything, parts of it are getting a little bit worse with the new models. So yeah, I think we've kind of reached the point of marginal returns on the LLMs, at least in terms of capabilities. Now, in terms of implementation, I think we have a long way to go, and there's a lot of money to be made there. But in terms of raw capabilities, they're proving not to be that much better.
Yeah. Yeah, and my son is a front end developer in Magento. Yeah, don't say
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's what he does for a living. And he's embraced Cursor
Yeah.
and using Claude Code, and he said he gets 4 times as much done now. And if you
Mhm.
don't embrace it, I think your boss is going to look at you like you should be using some of these tools to do the mundane tasks.
Yeah.
He is much more cautious of letting it do more than he thinks it should, where I'm a little more liberal on that. So I think I think you're right. I think you got it. Roy Rubin had said last year that websites are going to go away and we're all just going to be
Yeah.
buying through ChatGPT. I also don't think that's going to happen. So I think
I
there's a lot
yeah,
of
and I
predictions coming out right now that we'll see what happens at the end.
well, and I think, there was a prediction that brick and mortar retail was going to go away, but that doesn't happen. And, and part of it is just the format. A lot of people like to go to the store, browse it, touch the products, etc. Same thing on, if you go to a website an e-commerce website that is specialized, has good data, et cetera, yeah, you're going to get a lot more done there. It's going to be a much more satisfying experience because you don't know where, especially right now in the early days, you don't know where the LLM's getting their products. Are the prices really good or not? You've seen so many misfires. Yeah, I've seen LLMs, they continue to do this, like making up websites or
Right.
and their information, because the training takes so long before a new model is implemented. You got to train it, and then they got to QA it, and then they've got to check it for security and all that sort of stuff. So by the time you get that model, it's 6 months behind. Well, prices have changed. Even if it's using the web search techniques, it's not even going to be aware of like new stores, et cetera. Yeah, there's just so many gaps there that I think we're a ways away from that. Now, I do believe there's going to be a lot more commerce through LLMs than there is now. And honestly, Google's losing out on that. There are a lot of websites that are kind of decreasing in importance because of the LLMs. But replacement, some things over a very long period of time, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I think a lot of these. Well, I mean, I think everything's going to exponentially get better. I also I agree that we've kind of plateaued on some things, and then we're going to break out in other things. In the few minutes we have left, where do you think in the development space as an agency you should be sitting in terms of billing? And is it bringing down the price of software or custom software, especially for people? Or is it still, you still have to have that high level person to kind of watch things and maybe they're a little bit more efficient?
So the rates don't come down. We're getting more done with less time, and we generally charge for our time. I'm looking at ways to move away from that model, not because like I'm greedy and I want to charge the same amount as we did before, but because the tools do come with certain costs, and there's a certain amount of expertise required to use the AI tools that's a little bit more expensive than say a junior developer. So we haven't found the model on that. I think we're going to end up a little more fixed price on a lot of projects. We've already gone to fixed price on discovery, so we'll probably do some of that as well, from an agency standpoint. I think that every part of the agency has to embrace it, not just the developers. All of our business analysts, our project managers, everybody is using it. And I think we're going to have to become accustomed to running more quickly than would have been comfortable a year ago. It's the new space we're in. The river is now moving more quickly. I guess you could say we're going into the rapids, right? And we just have to adapt to that, like we always have. It's just, this has kind of accelerated things at a quicker pace, but in part because of all the hype. There's been so much investment and so much money going into creating these models. My biggest fear is that we're going to become dependent on them, and then they're going to start charging us what it really costs to generate tokens, which is what the models do. And I'm, right now, I don't know what we're paying, 20%, 30%. Nobody's making any money in that space. So, you know, and the rate of innovation is slowing down, and there's more pressure. You look at OpenAI, they're practically bankrupt. There's all these different headwinds that I think may increase the cost of AI, and I just hope it's still worth it at that
Yeah,
point.
I do think that contextual length will keep increasing, and the amount of tokens we can use in a chat will keep increasing,
Yeah,
that type of thing. But you're right. Yeah, I think that the cost will probably
yeah.
continue to increase as well, right?
Yeah, well, there are even a lot of headwinds for increasing the size of the contextual windows, because increasing just a little bit doubles the cost, can triple the cost. It increases the size of the model that you have to build. So it's not just a matter of adding more memory. It's I have to have that many more inputs on my entry nodes in my large language model or my neural net, right? And like that means like just adding a few more nodes, I got to expand that thing enormously. It's not just increasing server memory and that stuff. I think one thing that is going to continue to make a difference is moving as much of the actual AI to the edge. So whether it's actually running on your machine and then collaborating with the LLM on the back end, I think there's going to be that there's probably some juice to be squeezed out of that. over the next couple of years.
Yeah, my hope is that we can run the models on our own machines, but my hope is there'd be things like Claude Code that you just download and keep running that is
Mhm.
running internally, and you're not, sharing, and it's using its own internal resources. And certainly it's not going to be as big, but it's also going to learn from your project, and hopefully you can download as much as you need. And I do believe it's probably going to go that way. That's kind of where IDEs came from, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
even Photoshop, that's kind
Mhm.
of how it
Yeah,
started.
that's an excellent analogy, Photoshop.
Mhm. So, Paul, we have a few minutes left as it close out. I'm going to give you a shameless plug. I'm assuming I know what you're going to plug,
Appreciate it.
but go ahead. Anything you'd like to plug today?
Well, it just so happens that I released a book last week. And it's called Adapt or Die: The Real AI Playbook. You can get this, really the only place you can get it right now is at Amazon. But if you're looking for development work and you reach out to me, there's a good chance I'll send you a signed copy for free. Would be more than happy to do that to, for your listeners. Just, if it's useful to you, let me know. Give me best thing to do is give me a review on Amazon, because I've got the second book in my head already. They told me this was going to happen, that as soon as I released my first book, I was going to have my, the second book ready to go. And that's exactly what happened. So, I'd love to learn from this and make something, even better, more useful to as many people as possible.
Perfect. Yes, and I did get it. I have not read it yet, but I have a 13-hour flight coming up, so I
There you
plan
go.
on getting
Perfect
some reading in on the
opportunity.
airplane.
Yeah,
All right,
cool.
Paul Byrne, it's been such a great conversation. Adapt
Thanks,
or
Brent.
Die is your book. It's available on Amazon. We'll get those into the show notes. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Brent. It was such a pleasure.